He whispered behind her seat, voice dripping like poison. Bet you'd be warmer without that jacket. Rachel Monroe froze. One hand tightened around her sleeping daughter, the other clenched under the tray table. Another whisper. A hand grazed her seat. Then, quietly, the man beside her stood. No words, no anger, just a slow, trained precision that made the entire cabin hold its breath. Back off, he said, voice carved in stone. The predator stuttered, laughed, then silence again. Within minutes, he was escorted to the back of the plane. Rachel turned to the man. No smile, just eyes sharp as frost. Thank you. She didn't know it yet, but Logan Hayes wasn't just a stranger. He was the last man anyone should test at 30,000 feet, and the only one who would walk back into her life carrying more than her lost luggage. He carried a choice. One that would change everything. Stay with this story, because sometimes the ones who quietly stand up are the ones who never walk away. Type just one word, honor. And if you still believe in quiet courage, in second chances, in men who don't need uniforms to lead, then this channel was made for you. Rachel Monroe was 34 years old, with windswept brown hair usually tied in a low bun, and eyes that always looked like they hadn't quite finished crying. Her face carried the kind of quiet strength you only find in people who have held it together for too long. Dressed in her worn gray cardigan and a navy scarf her mother had knitted years ago, Rachel never tried to look invincible, but somehow always did. A registered nurse in Queens, New York, she worked double shifts at the trauma unit, balancing it all with raising her 5-year-old daughter, Lily. Every morning, she'd pack Lily's lunch with a folded note tucked inside and pour herself exactly 1 cup of black coffee. No cream, no sugar, no matter how tired she felt. The ritual wasn't about caffeine, it was about holding on to one thing that didn't change. Since her mother passed the week before, that morning coffee had tasted colder. The funeral in Denver had drained her. Emotionally, financially, entirely. Now, on a packed evening flight back to New York, Rachel sat in seat 22B, holding Lily's sleeping head against her shoulder like the only thing in the world that still made sense. Her suitcase in the overhead bin carried folded grief, black dresses, old photographs, and the scarf that still smelled faintly of rosewater and lavender. Next to her sat a man she hadn't spoken to. A tall figure in a dark hoodie, posture quiet but coiled. She hadn't looked at him long, her mind was too full, but something about him felt still, not in a passive way, but in the way of someone who noticed everything without needing to speak. A stillness that felt earned. The flight had been quiet, until it wasn't. 2 rows back, a voice cut through the low hum of engines. A voice coated in arrogance and vinegar. Bet you'd be warmer without that jacket. Rachel's spine stiffened. She didn't turn. She didn't respond. But the air changed. She felt it. Attention, sharp, wrong. Then came a shift behind her seat. A subtle scrape, the unmistakable brush of fingers where they didn't belong. Please don't touch me, she said, firm but even. Then silence. And behind it, the sound of someone smirking. Rachel didn't move, not yet. Her breath caught somewhere between her ribs and her throat as the silence behind her thickened into something heavier. She could feel the weight of the man's amusement, the kind of smirk you could hear without turning around. Then an unmistakable click. The man beside her, Logan Hayes, unbuckled his seatbelt. No sudden movements, no loud warnings, just one smooth, controlled shift in his seat as he rose, turning slightly to the aisle. The light overhead caught the side of his face. Clean jawline, eyes narrowed like a marksman sizing a distant threat. He didn't look at Rachel. He didn't need to. He was already where he needed to be. He took half a step forward, just enough to angle his body between her and the man 2 rows behind. He didn't face the man directly. Instead, he turned just slightly, shoulders squared, feet planted like anchors on a storm-tossed deck. The harasser leaned slightly forward, his voice sticky and smug. Hey, take it easy, man. Just talking. You need to stop, Logan said, not raising his voice. Not even a fraction. The words landed heavier than a shout. Sharp-edged, carved from something deeper than anger. The rows around them fell silent. Someone on the opposite aisle lowered their magazine. Even the engine hum seemed to dull. I said, Logan repeated, still without turning his head. Back off. This time the air shifted. The man behind them gave a huff of laughter. Faint, nervous. Who the hell do you think you are? And that's when Logan turned. Just his head. Slowly, deliberately. He looked at the man like someone who'd already counted all the ways this would end. I'm the last person you want to test at 30,000 feet, he said. Not a threat. A statement. The words hung there, motionless. And then, movement. A flight attendant appeared in the aisle, eyes darting between them. Is there a problem, sir? Logan didn't answer. He didn't need to. The man in 24C suddenly found himself the focus of 20 strangers' eyes and a uniformed attendant asking him to step to the back of the cabin, please. He cursed under his breath, huffed, but stood up. Logan stepped aside, never looking down, never showing satisfaction, just stepping out of the way like someone trained to clear a path. The cabin was still again, but now it was a different kind of quiet. The kind that lingers after something almost went very, very wrong. Logan sat down, smoothed the front of his hoodie, and buckled back in. He didn't glance at Rachel. He just looked forward again, as if the moment had already passed, as if it didn't matter. But Rachel was shaking. Her hand clutched Lily's small blanket, knuckles pale. She turned, slowly, heart still racing. "Thank you," she whispered. He didn't smile, just nodded once. "You're welcome." She looked closer now, noticed how his shoulders, though still, hadn't relaxed, how his eyes kept scanning the cabin, measuring tension like a man who had learned to read a room before bullets ever flew. There was something military in the way he moved, too measured for casual, too aware to be merely polite. She exhaled, quietly. The adrenaline was still thrumming under her skin, but her fear had somewhere to go now, into the space between them, into the hands of a stranger who hadn't asked for thanks, who hadn't hesitated, and who had already returned to stillness like nothing had happened. But Rachel knew better. Stillness like that wasn't born, it was forged, and she had just watched a man return to it like slipping back into old armor. 32 minutes after the altercation, the plane banked gently to the left. The captain's voice came on, calm but clipped. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to worsening conditions along the East Coast and temporary congestion in New York airspace, we'll be diverting to McKenzie Regional in Nebraska for refueling. We appreciate your patience." A collective groan swept through the cabin. Someone muttered a curse. Another passenger tapped frantically at a phone, trying to reconnect to a signal that wasn't there. Rachel leaned her head back, the exhaustion finally catching her. She felt it deep in her bones, the kind that didn't come from just one night, but from months, even years of holding everything together without breaking. She glanced at Lily, still asleep against her arm, lips slightly parted, one hand clutching her stuffed penguin like it was sacred. The plane touched down with a bump. Lights dimmed. The air outside the windows was white and swirling, the kind of snow that didn't fall, but flew sideways in hard gusts. "Passengers with young children are welcome to deplane into the terminal," the attendant announced. Rachel hesitated. She didn't want to move, didn't want to wake Lily, but Logan was already standing. He reached up, grabbed her carry-on without asking, and looked at her like it wasn't a question. "I've got it," he said simply. She blinked up at him, too tired to argue. "Thank you," she murmured. They stepped into the terminal, small, warm, and lined with beige fold-out chairs. A single vending machine blinked near the back. It smelled faintly of instant coffee and tired air. Logan cleared a space in the far corner, away from the crowd. Rachel sank into the seat, cradling Lily in her lap. Logan sat beside them, glancing around, alert in a way that felt like second nature. "She'll be out for a while," Rachel whispered, brushing Lily's hair back. "Not the worst place I've been stuck," Logan replied, voice low. Rachel followed his gaze. "Bet it's not the best either." He gave a faint smile. "No, but at least here, nobody's shooting at us." She turned to him, brow raised. "Is that a joke?" "Not really." Silence stretched between them. Not awkward, just full, like both were waiting for something they didn't yet have words for. "You said you were still active," Rachel said after a moment. "In the military?" "Consulting," he answered. "Mostly off the record. I train teams, advise, handle sensitive assets." She tilted her head. "You make it sound like a spy movie." He didn't smile. "Sometimes it feels that way." Before she could respond, a staffer in a red airport jacket approached, clipboard in hand. "We're assigning hotel vouchers for families with children," she said. "We're prioritizing single parents. Shared shuttles. 2 adults per room max." Rachel blinked, registering the fatigue crawling back into her spine. "That would be, yeah, that's us. If you're traveling alone," the woman began. "She's with me," Logan said calmly, not even looking at Rachel. The staffer nodded and scribbled something on her clipboard. "You're in group 4. Shuttles boarding in 10. When she walked away, Rachel turned to him, eyes wide. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," he said, "but it's past midnight. You haven't slept. You're not dragging a 5-year-old through more paperwork tonight." Rachel stared at him for a beat, then nodded. "Thanks," she said again. And this time it wasn't just about the room. The shuttle ride was silent. Outside, the snow looked heavier now, like it wasn't just falling, but settling in for the long haul. Inside the van, Lily shifted in her arms, murmuring something only a child could understand. Rachel leaned her forehead against the cool glass of the window. Beside her, Logan sat still, his arms folded, his eyes half-lidded but still watching everything. And Rachel, in a moment that caught her off guard, realized something she hadn't felt in a very long time. She wasn't carrying the night alone. The motel wasn't much, Just a roadside stop lit by flickering neon and wrapped in drifting snow. The kind of place that smelled like old coffee grounds and dryer sheets. But it was warm. And it was quiet. Rachel stood at the door of their assigned room. Lily asleep in her arms, her carry-on dragging softly behind. Logan stepped in first, scanning the space without saying a word. 2 queen beds, a dresser, a humming heater beneath a window painted with frost. He set her bag down in the corner and didn't linger. Just moved to the edge of the second bed and sat. His posture still composed. Hands resting on his knees like he was ready to rise at any moment. I can take the floor if it makes it easier, he offered. Rachel shook her head. It's fine, she said, voice low. You've done enough. She laid Lily gently on the nearer bed, pulled the blanket up to the little girl's chin, and stood for a moment, unsure of what to do next. There was a lamp between the 2 beds, casting a pool of soft amber light. Rachel sat across from him, curling one leg beneath her, arms still wrapped around herself like the chill had followed her inside. You always step in like that? She asked quietly. With strangers on planes? Logan took a moment before answering. No, he said. Only when I know what silence can cost. Rachel tilted her head, studying him. Not just the surface, but the way his eyes didn't flinch when he said it. What do you mean? For a second, he didn't answer. Then he leaned forward slightly, elbows on his thighs, gaze unfixed. Her name was Amina, he said. Rachel stayed quiet. She was an interpreter, he continued. Afghanistan. Brave. Smarter than most of us. We got intel there was a threat. I hesitated. Wanted confirmation. Waited. Protocol. He looked at her now, eyes steady but not hard. She didn't make it. The words settled between them like falling ash. Rachel felt the weight of them. Not just the grief but the guilt. The kind that lives in silence. Tight in the throat. Echoing in every second you wish you could take back. I'm sorry, she whispered. Logan didn't nod. Didn't dismiss it. He just sat there, the stillness around him thicker now. Not avoidance but control. The kind that gets built from the inside out when you've carried something for too long. I don't wait anymore, he said finally. When I see someone afraid to speak, I don't wait. Rachel exhaled, her breath shaky. She didn't expect this. Not from a man she'd met hours ago. But somehow it made sense. The way he moved. The way he looked at danger not like it startled him, but like he'd already counted the exits. She ran a hand through her hair. When Lily was born, I didn't know if I could do it, she said, voice softer. My mom was already sick, and her father, well, he was in love with the idea of being a dad. Not the reality. Logan didn't respond. He waited. He left before she was born, Rachel said. I stayed in my hometown, took care of mom, worked 2 jobs, didn't go anywhere, didn't date, just held everything together. There was a quiet pause. I thought that was strength, she added. It is, Logan said, looking directly at her now. Rachel blinked. You're still standing, he said. That counts. She looked away, not out of shame, but because the words landed closer than she expected. More honest than she was ready for. Outside, the wind whistled against the window. Inside, silence stretched. Not empty, but safe. Logan stood and walked to the motel fridge. Pulled out 2 plastic water bottles, handed one to her. Hydration helps, he said with a small smirk. Rachel laughed. Surprised her. That military wisdom? No, he said. That's what people say when they're too afraid to hand you a tissue. She shook her head, smiling. Then, in a quieter voice, I don't usually talk to strangers like this. Logan opened his bottle. I don't usually sit in Nebraska motel rooms with people I met 4 hours ago. So we're even. He nodded once. Across the space, Lily stirred but didn't wake. One arm flung over her penguin. Her small body utterly at peace. Rachel glanced at her daughter, then back at Logan. And for the first time that night, maybe the first in years, she didn't feel like she was holding up the ceiling alone. The morning came soft and gray. Snow clung to the motel parking lot in uneven piles, slushed at the edges by idling shuttles. Inside the room, Rachel folded Lily's tiny sweatshirt into the carry-on bag, fingers pausing now and then like her mind was still somewhere else. Somewhere quieter than real life usually allowed. Logan stood by the door, hoodie zipped, duffel already over his shoulder. He looked the same as he had the night before, silent, steady. But now his stillness held something different. Not watchfulness, not tension, something closer to readiness. Like he'd already accepted goodbye. The ride back to the airport was wordless. Lily, now awake, leaned against Rachel's arm, blinking slowly as she watched snow swirl past the window. Logan sat opposite, hands folded in his lap, eyes fixed on something invisible. But the silence wasn't uncomfortable now. Felt earned. By noon, they were back in the air. The cabin buzzed with quiet relief, No turbulence. No detours. No confrontation in row 22. Just the rhythmic drone of engines and the occasional whisper of a turned page. Rachel stared out the window, sky stretching into a sheet of white beyond the wing. Her fingers tapped lightly against the armrest. She didn't want to think about what came next. Her apartment, the clinic, the endless rhythm of holding everything together. She didn't want to admit how much she didn't want this flight to end. In the seat beside her, Lily drew pictures with a stubby crayon on the back of a paper napkin. A family of stick figures. One was tall with big arms. Another wore a triangle dress. The third had a small penguin beside it. Rachel glanced sideways. Logan was reading something on his phone, brow slightly furrowed in thought, but calm. Always calm. The wheels touched down at JFK with a soft thud. Inside the baggage claim terminal, chaos resumed. People rushed. Voices echoed. Suitcases thudded onto the carousel with dull certainty. Rachel retrieved their bag and turned to find Lily, her tiny hand already wrapped around Logan's. Like she'd done it 100 times before. Rachel's breath caught for a second. Logan noticed and slowly released his grip, stepping back. "She's a strong kid," he said. Rachel nodded. "She gets it from her grandmother." They stood there for a moment in that awkward in-between, where strangers part, but something deeper lingers beneath the silence. "Well," Rachel said finally, breaking the pause, "thanks for everything." Logan tilted his head. "Really?" he asked like it surprised him. She smiled faintly. "Yeah. You need a ride?" She hesitated. "No, we're good. My friend's picking us up." He nodded once. "Okay." Rachel reached out, extending her hand. "Take care of yourself." He shook it, firm, steady, unflinching. "You too," he said. Then he turned and walked away, steps unhurried, posture straight, as if he was walking into something known, something expected. Rachel watched him until he vanished past the sliding doors. Her throat tightened, not with panic, not even grief, just the weight of something unfinished. Beside her, Lily tugged on her sleeve. "Will we see him again?" Rachel didn't answer. She couldn't, because the truth was, she didn't know, and somehow not knowing hurt more than she expected. 3 days passed. Life resumed its rhythm like a song Rachel hadn't realized she'd memorized. Early mornings. Lily's lunch packed with quiet care. Long shifts at the clinic where everything moved fast. Blood pressure, paperwork, people in pain. And yet somehow she still felt slow, disconnected, like a part of her had stayed behind in Nebraska, sitting in the glow of that motel lamp, talking to a man who carried silence like armor. The apartment was quiet again, but it wasn't the same kind of quiet. It was louder somehow, colder. Not because the temperature had dropped, but because something in her had changed. That night, after Lily had gone to bed, Rachel opened her laptop. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then she typed it. Logan Hayes. First nothing. Then a hit, small, buried, 6 years old. A blurry photo. A press release. Colonel Logan Hayes awarded commendation for leadership in a successful hostage recovery operation overseas. The rest was redacted. No details. No names. Just a sliver of truth beneath layers of secrets. But it was enough. Rachel stared at the screen, heart hammering. He hadn't told her any of it. Not the title. Not the mission. Not the reason his gaze had seemed 10 miles deep every time he looked away. He had stepped in on that plane not for attention. Not for praise. Not even for her approval. He had done it because it was right. She closed the laptop. The next morning, just after 8, her doorbell rang. Rachel blinked, caught off guard. She wasn't expecting anyone. She opened the door slowly, and there he was. Logan. Same hoodie. Same stillness. Only this time his eyes weren't scanning. They were steady, direct, and tired not from travel but from carrying too much for too long. "I had some leave time stored up," he said, voice quieter than she remembered. "Thought I'd use it." Rachel didn't speak at first. "How did you?" He lifted his phone. "Your address was on the luggage tag. I wrote it down, just in case." There was no arrogance in how he said it. No smirk, just honesty. A man who hadn't wanted to leave something unfinished. Then he reached into his jacket. "Your daughter left something behind on the plane." He handed her a folded piece of paper, crinkled with 3 stick figures drawn in bright crayon. One tall, one small, one in a dress, all holding hands. Rachel looked at it, then looked at him. Her throat tightened again. She stepped aside. "Come in," she said softly. Logan nodded once, and stepped over the threshold. And something shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with quiet certainty. Like a door closing behind a storm. The kettle whistled faintly in the kitchen. Rachel poured water into 2 mismatched mugs, steam curling upward like breath in winter. In the living room, Lily giggled at her drawing, now coloring Logan's stick figure orange. Logan stood nearby, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the shelf. Photos of Rachel and her mother. Baby pictures. A graduation cap hung crooked on the edge of a frame. Rachel handed him a mug. Chamomile. It's all I had. I've had worse, he said, taking it with a nod. He sat down on the couch, looking slightly out of place in a world of pastel toys and soft blankets. But somehow he fit. Not because he tried, but because he didn't. Rachel sat across from him, fingers wrapped around her cup like it held more than heat. I still can't believe you showed up. I wasn't sure I would, he admitted. Then I saw the drawing. He nodded toward Lily, who was now carefully drawing bunny ears on herself. She doesn't let people in easily, Rachel said. With you. It was like she already knew you. Logan looked down, a faint shift in his posture. Like the compliment settled heavier than expected. I think kids can tell, he said. When someone means it. The air between them softened. Not perfect, not easy, but real. The knock came just after noon. Rachel frowned, halfway through folding laundry while Lily napped in the next room. She wasn't expecting anyone. The hallway beyond the door was quiet, sun filtering through the frosted glass. She opened it cautiously. A man in a dark suit stood there, early 40s, crisp posture, badge clipped to his belt. His eyes scanned past her almost immediately, and landed squarely on Logan, who had just stepped into the living room with 2 mugs of fresh tea in hand. Colonel Hayes, the man said. Rachel stiffened. Logan didn't flinch, but Rachel could see his entire posture shift in an instant. Shoulders squared, spine straightening like a reflex he never unlearned. I told command I was on leave, Logan said. I'm not here for command, the man replied. I'm here because of the Cairo file. Rachel's gaze shot between them. What's going on? Logan's voice dropped just slightly. It's nothing, just a formality. The agent's tone was flat, unreadable. You're not under investigation, Colonel, but we do need to ask you a few questions. Now, there was no shouting, no dramatics, just a stillness that felt louder than anything. Logan looked at Rachel, then gently set the mugs down on the nearby table. I'm sorry. He crossed the room, stopped at the threshold and turned back to her. But he didn't explain. He didn't offer promises. He just closed the door softly behind him. Rachel stood motionless, tea cooling in her hand. The silence was different now, heavier, like something had been taken away mid-sentence. From the kitchen, a small voice broke through. Where did Logan go? Lily stood in the doorway, pajamas wrinkled from her nap, hair sticking up at odd angles. Rachel swallowed the knot rising in her throat. He had to take care of something. Outside, Logan walked beside the agent, boots crunching softly against the snow. Neither spoke at first. Then, as they approached the black SUV idling at the curb, the agent finally glanced at him. You sure about this? He asked. Getting involved with civilians? Logan didn't answer. He didn't need to. He just kept walking, not toward safety, not toward danger, but toward something more complicated. Inside, Rachel sat in the kitchen long after the door closed, the 2 mugs of tea still steaming faintly. She stared at them like they might offer clarity. But they didn't. Lily returned to her drawing pad, unfazed, crayon moving across the page. But Rachel couldn't shake the image of Logan's face before he left. It wasn't fear. It wasn't duty. It was resignation. Like a man who had lived the scene before, walked away before things got too close. Later that night, once Lily had fallen asleep, Rachel stood in the hallway outside her daughter's room. Her arms crossed tight. The apartment was dark except for the glow of the laptop still open on the kitchen table. She walked over slowly, sat down, and typed, Logan Hayes Cairo file. At first just noise, military reports scrubbed of names, vague references, dates. Then one article, a watchdog blog, buried beneath layers of digital dust. A headline, SEAL-linked operation in Cairo sparks quiet controversy. No names, no confirmations, just whispers of a civilian casualty. One line stood out. Sources suggest a decorated U.S. officer temporarily suspended from field command, following an intelligence failure that resulted in unintended loss of life. Rachel leaned back, heart pounding. He hadn't been talking about Amina. He'd been talking about a child. And he'd been talking about her. Suddenly, every quiet pause, every unsaid word, every flicker in his gaze made sense. Because sometimes a man doesn't tell you his secrets. He just carries them, and walks away before they get too loud. A week passed. Rachel didn't hear from him. Not a call, not a message. The thread of silence stretched tighter each day, fraying in places she didn't want to admit. She tried not to stare at the phone, tried not to reread the Cairo article, tried not to wonder what it meant that the drawing Lily taped to the wall, the one with 3 stick figures holding hands, was still there, untouched. Then, one Thursday morning, just after sunrise, Rachel stepped outside to take out the trash, and froze. Logan stood at the bottom of the stairs. Same hoodie, same stillness. But his face, his eyes looked different. Not guarded, not distant, just tired. Not from travel or war. From running. He didn't move. I shouldn't have left the way I did, he said. Rachel didn't answer. Not yet. I thought I was protecting you, he continued, stepping forward slowly. By keeping my past out of your life. Still, she said nothing. But what I didn't realize, he stopped, breath fogging in the cold, is that maybe you weren't the one who needed protecting. A long silence opened between them. The morning was quiet except for the rustle of wind through dry leaves. A car engine turned over somewhere in the distance. Then finally Rachel spoke. What happened in Cairo? Logan looked down. When he looked up again, his voice was low but steady. When I gave the order to move, he said. A child was in the building. We didn't see her until it was too late. Rachel inhaled sharply. That's the thing about command, he added. You live with decisions no one else remembers. But you don't forget. Not ever. Rachel stepped back, then to the side. Come in. He hesitated. Are you sure? She nodded. You're not the only one who's had to live with ghosts. The door clicked shut behind them. Logan stood inside the apartment, just past the entryway, arms hanging by his sides like he didn't know whether to sit or stand. Rachel watched him closely. He wasn't the same man who'd sat beside her on that flight, or even the man who'd carried her bag through a snowstorm in Nebraska. He was stripped down, honest, bare in a way few people ever are. You didn't have to come back, she said. I know, he replied, but not coming back felt worse. She didn't speak, just watched as he reached into his back pocket and pulled out his wallet. From it, he slid a thin, military green ID card across the table. Colonel Logan Hayes, United States Air Force. It read. I figured it was time you saw it, he said. Rachel looked down at the card, then up at him. Why didn't you tell me before? He didn't flinch. Because I didn't want to be the guy on the plane with the uniform, or the file, or the weight. I wanted to be someone you could look at and not flinch. Rachel exhaled slowly. I never flinched, Logan. I just didn't know. He nodded. A small, tight motion. Not in pride, more like relief. Then soft footsteps padded into the room. Lily, still in pajamas, hair tousled from sleep, blinked up at him, then broke into a grin. You came back. Logan smiled, dropped to one knee. I said I would. She launched forward, arms around his neck like she'd been waiting all week to do exactly that. Rachel watched them. Watched the way Logan held her daughter not like a soldier, but like a man who finally knew what it meant to be home. When he stood, Rachel gestured toward the kitchen. Come on, she said. I'll make coffee. He followed her in. The sunlight through the window was soft and pale. The coffee maker gurgled quietly in the corner. Logan sat at the table, shoulders a little more relaxed now, hands wrapped around the warmth of a ceramic mug. They didn't talk about what was next, but for the first time, neither of them was thinking about leaving. The sky outside was the pale gray of late spring, and Rachel stood at the window, stirring her coffee without drinking it. The apartment was quiet, save for the distant sound of Lily humming in her room, rearranging her doll tea party for the 5th time that morning. On the couch, Logan sat with his elbows on his knees, staring down at his hands like they were foreign to him. He'd come by early, unannounced but not unwelcome. Rachel had let him in without asking why. Now, as she turned from the window, she saw the envelope he had placed on the table. Plain, white, heavy with things not yet spoken. I never wanted to be the man who just disappears, he said finally, voice low. But sometimes it's easier than staying. Rachel didn't answer. She just walked over, sat beside him, and placed her coffee mug down without a sound. I've been in the Air Force for over 20 years, Logan continued. Survived operations in places people only read about. Cairo, Kandahar, Haiti. I've led men into buildings we knew we might not leave. But none of it ever asked what I wanted after. Rachel's brow furrowed gently. And now, he turned to her, something flickering behind his eyes. Not fear but resolve. Now I want something different. He slid the envelope toward her. She opened it slowly, fingers trembling just enough to betray how much she understood this moment mattered. Inside, formal military discharge papers. Effective immediately. Honorable. Final. Rachel looked up, startled. You're leaving. No, he said. I'm staying. I'm leaving that life. I'm not running anymore. I've done my time. But lately, it feels like time has been doing me. He exhaled hard, shoulders falling just slightly. I used to think wearing the uniform was who I was. That without it, I'd disappear. But now I know, identity isn't what we wear. It's who we choose to stand beside when the dust clears. Rachel swallowed. Her throat was tight. You did this for me? No, he said quietly. I did this because for the first time I wanted to stay for something. Someone. I want mornings with mismatched mugs and late-night storybooks. I want to be there when Lily loses her first tooth. I want to fix leaky faucets, paint walls, burn toast. He trailed off, then added more softly, I want to answer to a name that's not called over a radio. Rachel's eyes brimmed, but she didn't blink. You sure you're ready for this life? She asked, half teasing, half daring. He smiled, small but steady. I've faced war zones with less fear. She reached for his hand, warm and calloused, and held it between hers. Neither of them said anything else. They didn't need to, because some promises aren't made with vows or grand gestures. They're made in silence, and kept in the choice to stay. The folding chairs squeaked against the polished linoleum as parents shuffled into the small elementary school auditorium. Paper stars dangled from strings above the stage. A plastic banner read in crooked red letters, Congratulations, kindergarten graduates. Rachel adjusted the hem of her dress and scanned the crowd for a familiar face. Logan had said he'd try to come. Try? She didn't ask what that meant. Didn't press. She just said okay, smiled, and kissed Lily's forehead as the little girl joined her classmates backstage, crown slightly askew on her curls. The lights dimmed. A muffled piano chord sounded. Tiny voices began to sing. Rachel smiled at all the wrong notes, the missed cues, the proud chaos of it all. Then, out of the corner of her eye, movement at the back of the room. She turned. There he was, Logan Hayes. No uniform, no medals, just a light blue button-down shirt and dark jeans. Hands in pockets, shoulders straight, a small paper gift bag hanging loosely from one wrist. He stood alone, quietly watching. But this time, not from behind the lines. He was here, present, visible. As the performance ended and the children filed off stage, Lily spotted him. Her eyes widened. She pointed. Then she ran, arms stretched out like wings. Logan! He knelt just in time to catch her. Rachel made her way through the rows slowly, her heart pounding with something she hadn't felt in years. Not relief, not surprise, belonging. She reached them as Logan rose. Lily perched on his hip, tiny arms looped around his neck. I thought you had a meeting, Rachel said softly, teasing the edge of emotion in her voice. I did, he replied, with a 6-year-old graduate. I wasn't going to miss it. He reached into the gift bag and pulled out a single item handmade, wrapped in pink tissue. Lily tore it open with glee. Inside was a snow globe, tiny figures under a flurry of plastic snow. A woman, a child, a man in civilian clothes holding hands. Lily shook it. Rachel stared at the scene inside, the light catching in the swirl. You made this? She asked. He nodded. I don't want medals. I want memories. For a long moment they said nothing. Then Rachel leaned in, pressing a kiss to his cheek. Lily giggled, still shaking the globe. A photographer walked by, offered to take a family photo. Logan looked to Rachel. She nodded. Why not? Click. In the photo, 3 smiles. 3 hands held. 3 lives, finally aligned. And though there was no flag, no anthem, no applause, something had been won. Not a war, not a mission, but a future. One chosen, one built, not by orders but by love. And though no music played as they stood together, though the moment passed without headlines or cheers, something far greater had just taken root. Promise. Not the kind sworn in uniforms or courtrooms, but the kind you make when you choose to show up quietly again and again. If that kind of vow still matters to you, stay with this story a little longer. There's more waiting to be felt. Just one word in the comments. Dignity. If you believe some strengths don't need to shout. And if you're the kind of soul who still believes that steadfast love, silent courage, and the quiet act of staying are the things that hold this world together, then this space was made to feel like home.